The quiet pressure to look effortless is actually more work than ever. It's kind of funny how now the goal is to look like you didn't do much, but you actually did a lot. Like the whole effortless thing sounds nice on the surface, but when you really pay attention to it, it's not effortless at all. It's just less obvious. Because there was a time where the look was very clearly high effort. You could see it, you knew it, nobody was pretending otherwise. The hair, the lashes, the makeup, the body, the outfits, it was all very intentional and very visible. Now it's like the exception flipped. You're still supposed to look good, but you're not supposed to look like you tried that hard to get there. And that's where it gets interesting because that actually requires a different type of effort. It's not loud effort, it's maintenance. And maintenance is way more consistent than just getting dressed up because getting dressed up is occasional. Maintenance is every day. And I feel like that's where a lot of women are feeling pressure because it's not like before where you could just turn it on when you felt like it. Now it's more like you're expected to always look put together at a baseline. Like your default has to be good, not just your going out version. And that's a completely different standard because now it's not about transformation, it's about consistency. And consistency is harder to fake. You can fake a look for a night, you can't fake habits long term. And I think that's why this whole effortless look is actually more work than what came before it because it forces you into routines whether you realize it or not. Like even when you look at skin, clear, even skin doesn't just happen randomly. That's routine. That's what you're eating, how you're sleeping, how you're managing stress, what products you're using consistently. The same thing with the body. A body that looks toned or just naturally nice all the time, that's not occasional effort. That's regular movement, regular eating patterns, some level of discipline. Even if it's not extreme, it's consistent. And I think people underestimate how much consistency goes into looking like you didn't try because the whole point is that it's not supposed to be obvious. That's the aesthetic. Subtle, but maintained. And I think that's where a lot of pressure is coming from because now it's not just about doing something when you feel like it, it's about maintaining a certain standard all the time. And that doesn't leave a lot of room to just not be on top of things. Like if you fall off your routine for a while, it shows faster in this kind of aesthetic. Whereas before, you could kind of cover things up. Now it's less about covering and more about upkeep. And upkeep requires a different mindset. It's less exciting too, if we're being honest, because routines are repetitive. There's nothing flashy about doing the same things over and over again, but that's exactly what creates that effortless look. And I don't think people always connect those two things. They just see the end result and think it's natural or easy or just how someone is, when in reality, there's a system behind it. Even if it's not extreme or not rigid, there's still something being maintained. That's where some of the comparison starts to feel off because you're comparing your real everyday self to someone else's maintained baseline. And it doesn't look like effort on their end, so it feels like you're the only one trying, but you're not. It's just not being shown the same way anymore. And I think social media plays a huge role in that because what gets pushed now is that I just woke up like this kind of presentation, even when it's not actually that. And I'm not even saying that in a negative way. It's just that's the style right now. Minimal, clean, put together, but not overly done. And that look is very controlled. It just doesn't look controlled, which is the whole point. And I feel like that creates this quiet expectation where you feel like you should be able to reach that level without doing too much. But in reality, it does take something. It just takes a different kind of effort than people are used to seeing. And I think this is where a lot of women start to feel like something is off because you'll hear people say things like, I'm not really doing anything different, or I don't try that hard. But then when you actually look closer, there are things being done. They're just not being framed as effort. It's like the effort got rebranded. It's not called effort anymore. It's just called lifestyle. And that sounds softer, but it's still structured. Because if you're waking up, eating a certain way, moving your body a certain way, keeping your skin up a certain way, that is a pattern. And patterns take intention, whether someone admits it or not. And I think that's where people get tripped up because they're comparing themselves to someone who has already built a pattern, but they're only seeing the result of that pattern, not the repetition behind it. So it looks easy, but it's only easy because it's already a habit. And habits don't look like effort once they're established. They just look like someone's natural state. That's where two people can technically be doing similar things, but it looks completely different. One person is forcing it. The other person has already integrated it. And that integration is what people read as effortless. Not the absence of effort, just the absence of visible struggle. And that's a big difference because struggling is visible, consistency is not. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect comes from, especially when it comes to body and fitness, because now it's not even about extremes anymore. It's not about going super hard in the gym for a short period of time and then stopping. It's more about what are you doing every week? What are you doing regularly? What does your baseline look like? And that baseline is what people are starting to notice more than anything. Not the extremes, not the before and after, just the everyday version of you. And that's a quieter kind of pressure because it's not loud. It's nobody saying you need to look like this, but you can see what's being rewarded. You can see what's getting attention and you can see what people are responding to. And over time, that shapes behavior without anyone having to say anything directly. That's why I call it quiet pressure, because it's not coming from one place. It's coming from what you're seeing over and over again. And eventually you start adjusting without even realizing it. You start thinking more about what you're eating. You start thinking about how often you're moving. You start thinking about how you look on a regular day, not just when you're dressed up. And that shift is where the real change is happening because it moves you out of occasional effort and into consistent upkeep. And upkeep is where discipline lives. Even if it doesn't feel intense, even if it doesn't feel strict, it's still something you're maintaining. And maintenance requires awareness. You don't maintain something by accident. You maintain it because you're paying attention. And I think that's another part people don't really talk about. It sounds better to say something is natural. It sounds better to say something is effortless, but in reality, there's usually some level of awareness behind it. Even if it's not extreme or obsessive, there's still a level of intention there. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do think it's worth acknowledging because when it's not acknowledged, it creates this weird standard where it feels like you're supposed to get results without recognizing the process. And that's not realistic. And I think that's why some people feel frustrated because they're trying to match an outcome without adjusting the patterns that lead to that outcome. And it doesn't work like that. You can't separate the two. The look comes from the lifestyle. Even if the lifestyle is subtle or not extreme, it's still there. And I feel like once you actually see that clearly, it changes how you interpret everything because now you're not looking at someone and thinking, oh, they just have it like that. You're thinking, okay, what are they doing consistently that I'm not seeing? And that's a much more grounded way of looking at it because it brings it back to reality, not comparison. And I think that's important, especially now. Because the way things are presented online is getting more and more polished, but less and less obvious about the effort behind it. And if you don't recognize that, it's really easy to feel like you're falling behind or not measuring up, when really you're just not seeing the full picture. And if I'm being honest, I think this version of effortless is actually more demanding than the older versions of beauty standards. Because at least before you knew when you were on and when you were off. Now it feels like there's less separation between those two. Your off is expected to look like a certain level, and that changes how people move day to day. And subtle changes over time add up. That's how standards shift without anyone announcing that they've shifted. It just happens through repetition and visibility. And then one day you look up and realize the baseline is different than when it used to be. And everybody is adjusting in real time, whether they realize it or not. If you've noticed that shift too, or you've caught yourself thinking differently about your own routine or appearance lately, I'd be interested to see what you have to say in the comments about that. Thank you for watching this video. If you are a current subscriber, thank you for coming back to this, and I will have more uploads throughout the week. And if you're a new subscriber, welcome, welcome. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and let me know what you're thinking, how you're feeling in the comments. Take care.